Why the tortoise has a broken shell. The tortoise was the most cunning of all the creatures, and he knew it. In fact, all the animals knew it. At this particular time, the birds were invited to a huge feast in the sky, an annual celebration for the coming of the new rains. The drought upon the land had been terrible. The scorching African sun took little pity on the earth and choked up all that signified the color green. The ground lay prostrate in surrender to its unforgiving heat, begging for any kind of watery relief. The slow gathering of the clouds gave notice to the earth's animals that the drought was finally almost over. Everyone waited in great expectation to quench their thirst from the rains that would break the heavens open and bring with it new life and new hope to the earth. During this exciting period, the older birds would come out of the shadows of their caves that would shield their ailing bodies from the sun and would gather the young ones to tell them stories of old, especially how the tall, two-legged creatures that walked the face of the earth would sometimes call their aid to carry messages to far-off lands. They would ruffle their old feathers in remembrance of their adventures, their swooping activities between majestic trees, and gliding exploits over the tops of the highest mountains. The birds chirped in excitement and whispered among themselves through song which rose in the air like round rings of smoke puffed from an old pipe and disappearing into oblivion. They dipped some of their feathers in red camwood and painted intricate patterns on their bodies with chalk and charcoal. Tortoise noticed the commotion and eventually got to find out what it was all about. He immediately made mental plans on how he could be part of the party, as he was almost starved for 2 full moons. He started worming his way in by offering free but unnecessary counsel and suggestions for the party. This seemed to work because after several gatherings to discuss the intricacies of the event, the birds came to a unanimous agreement to appoint Tortoise as their master of ceremony, since he had a broad voice and was well versed with various cultures and traditions of the earth. The pigeon was sent on behalf of the birds to inform Tortoise of this privileged appointment. Of course, he graciously agreed after pretending to decline the invitation for a short while. He, however, sent word back that there was an age-old compulsory custom that the hosts of the heavens observed for big feasts. Every attendant of the event had to come to the feast bearing a new name, and the tortoise cunningly chose the name, All of You. The birds had never heard of this so-called age-old tradition, and wondered in their little minds how it had never been mentioned before. They grumbled among themselves, knowing very well that Tortoise was not one to be trusted. But because he was well-travelled and his sweet tongue wove confusion among them, they eventually agreed and all picked new names for themselves. So the days went by, and the festival of the birds drew closer and closer until it finally arrived. Because the tortoise had no wings, every bird donated one of their feathers to him, which he used to make 2 majestic ones. On the fateful day, the hawk and the eagle came in all their majesty to accompany the tortoise to the heavens. Before they even arrived at their destination, the skies were a wondrous sight. Birds of all kinds filled the air with their different patterns and painted bodies. Feathers of all imaginable colors floated with ease across the skies, forming patterns shielding the earth from the sun, whose rays occasionally broke through their collective shade. The clouds brimmed with huge raindrops and reflected some of the sun's glorious rays, adding onto the powerful collage of flowers. The glorious event began, and Tortoise spoke on behalf of the birds. His smooth and eloquent speech, coupled with his enormous multicolored wings, fooled the hosts of the heavens into thinking that he was the leader of the birds. All who were under the spell of his voice were captivated by his stories and eloquent speech. His deep and vast knowledge of all that creeped and crawled along the earth, and their associated peculiarities, skillfully wove their ways into the hearts of all that gathered, such that any doubt concerning his invitation was quickly melted away like wax before the flame. Kola nut was then broken and shared among them, accompanied with blessings of good health and long life. It was finally time to partake in the feast. The hosts of the heavens brought out pots and pots of the most delectable dishes. Everyone who saw them watered their mouths in anticipation. It almost felt as if the aroma that rose from the food teased the nostrils of them that gathered, reminding them of the weeks and months they had endured without food. Clay pots were brought in straight from the cooking places, filled to the brim with vegetable soup, egusi, and fish stew. Tall mounds of fufu and pounded yam followed closely after, and all the birds cheered with eagerness. Fresh palm wine overflowed from their drinking pots, and a few of the birds gathered branches to stop the sweet liquid from frothing out. Clay pots of okra soup joined the food procession, bubbling from the heat, with its surface intermittently broken by fish pieces swimming up to the surface. Tortoise nearly lost his mind at the sight of all the delicacies, but just managed to restrain himself. His dry, underweight body moved around the empty spaces in his shell as he planned his next move. The hosts of the heavens then invited the birds to begin serving themselves when he jumped to his feet with a loud cough. The crowd turned toward him to hear what was so important that could not wait until they could dig their claws into the food. Tortoise stood and addressed the hosts in a broad and defiant voice. "Who is this feast prepared for?" In a loud chorus, the hosts responded, "For all of you, of course." Some of the birds chirped along, wondering why Tortoise would ignorantly ask such a stupid question. Cunningly, Tortoise responded, "Remember, good people, that my name is all of you. Therefore, the hosts shall serve me first before you get your own share." The hosts then tasted a little from each pot, as was the custom, and gave way for Tortoise to proceed. He devoured the food with no reservations, eating the most and the best part of the feast. The birds stared at each other in disbelief with the realization that they had been played. At the end of it all, Tortoise was so filled up that his body visibly expanded, filling up the previously empty spaces within his shell that he could hardly walk. The rest grumbled loudly with exasperation, while those who could not contain their hunger pecked away at the scraps and bones Tortoise threw all over the place. Most of the birds just flew away with anger. Before they left, however, each bird pounced on Tortoise and plucked out the feather they had given him until he was left bare. Stuck up in the heavens, with no how he could leave, Tortoise began to beg the birds to deliver a message to his wife for him. But the birds would not hear any of it, knowing that he was only displaying fake remorse. It was only Parrot, who was the most offended of the bunch, that eventually decided to hear him out. Tortoise asked him to tell his wife to bring out all the blankets, mattresses, pillows, and soft items out of the house so he could jump down from the heavens and have a soft landing, since he had no wings. Seeing this as a golden opportunity for revenge, Parrot went to Tortoise's wife and instructed her to bring out all the hard and sharp objects from his house. Mrs. Tortoise had no idea what all the fuss was about, but knowing her husband's cunning nature, she assured herself that this was another one of his dubious acts. Hence, she brought out bricks, axes, picks, hoes, hammers, pots, spades, and all of her sharpest knives for her one and true love. She even went so far as to borrow some items from her neighbors. Tortoise looked down from the skies and watched the commotion with a smile on his face. But because he was too far away, he could not see what she was bringing out. He waited until he was sure she was done, and with a majestic cry, he jumped and allowed gravity to take over. It seemed as if the fall would never end, until he was only a few meters away from the ground. It was only then that he was aware of what Parrot had done, but it was too late. With a loud thud, he crashed into the objects, and with the sound of 1,000 splinters, his shell broke into 1,000,000 pieces. His wife helped to gather them sorrowfully while he recounted what had transpired in the sky. She then took the pieces to the master Babalao, who was known as the greatest medicine man of all the villages. He told them that he could not help them because the mischief Tortoise had caused had angered the gods of the land. The best Babalao could do was to glue the pieces together. Thus, till today, the tortoise is still scarred for life with an unsmooth shell. The end.